What's up, everybody? Matthew here. Thank you so much for checking into the channel. Of course, this channel focuses primarily on theology, Bible teaching, sermons, church history, and so forth. But today we have to talk about current events because we have what appears to me to be the rise of leftist terrorism or trans terrorism that is quickly encroaching in our country, and we need to talk about this. We need to talk about this honestly and openly. In the past few days, there's been so much news that has been transpiring that some people have not caught up from the weekend, and I want to make sure that people that follow my channel, regular people that just consume kind of everyday news, are actually caught up to the moment of what really happened with Charlie Kirk's assassination that happened just last week. Such an important moment, a watershed moment in our nation's history, no doubt, as we saw basically live streamed a Christian martyrdom that almost everybody saw the video of. Shocking and terrifying, no doubt about that. But in the hours that followed immediately from Charlie Kirk's assassination, there was a lot of question about what kind of person would do this. What kind of person would be motivated to go perch at the top of a university building and basically fire off one round from a .30-06 rifle and assassinate, kill in cold blood a man of obvious religious conviction. Charlie Kirk, a very strong Christian, a born-again Christian, an evangelical Christian. Not only that, but espousing viewpoints that would represent the political right. And so you have to ask yourself, what kind of a person would do that? Well, we know a lot more about the person that would do that today. Here we are, Tuesday of the following week, and I just want to share with you what we know about this because, again, some people are not following carefully enough. Immediately following the assassination, both sides of the political spectrum were kind of like, grinding the gears, rubbing their hands, wondering who did this, what kind of a person. Well, we know. We know now. Tyler Robinson, 22 years old, identifies very clearly with leftist ideology. Now, the media, particularly some of the more insidious forms of the media, immediately tried to peg Tyler Robinson as belonging to the right. As a matter of fact, we just need to be clear here that there was an AI fabricated post that came out immediately in which somebody had taken the suspect, Tyler Robinson, and AI'd him into a Trump-supporting t-shirt. And of course, if you listen to any leftist media, what they're going to tell you is that he was some sort of a far-right Trump supporter, that he was a groyper or something like that. If you're not familiar with the word groyper, Groyper, it's basically the extreme right of the extreme right. Now, even saying that, it's like, okay, the left portrays everybody as far right, extreme right. But if all things are on a continuum, there really is a far right, and that would be what we sometimes call on the internet a groyper. So the regular, everyday, mainstream media was trying to put Tyler Robinson as a far-right groyper, of course, because they want to smear the right. But that is not the case. That is not the case at all. Everything that has come out in the media by way of real investigative journalism and the FBI's interviewing and research and so forth into this case has suggested that no, Tyler Robinson is actually a leftist, and we have the receipts to discuss that today in this particular video. He had left a string of text messages to friends, and certainly there was some conversation on like a Discord server in which Tyler Robinson had several days before he had done this talked about his plans, and afterwards even confessed on this text chat or Discord server. He said, here's the quote here, that he had a hatred that cannot be negotiated with for Charlie Kirk and his message. Now, you have to ask, again, who would kill Charlie Kirk? Well, someone who doesn't believe what Charlie Kirk believes, somebody who believes the opposite of what Charlie Kirk believes. So we're going to look into some of this matter today. I'm going to share a screen with you, and I want to show you some stuff that has me concerned. Now, interestingly enough, I want to mention this before we go too much further. In my prayers today, I have a little prayer notebook that I use every day, or most days at least, where I have just one Bible verse. That is my meditation verse for the morning or for the evening. And sure enough, today's verse was Matthew 5:44, pray for those who persecute you. And we need to do that. We need to pray for this killer's conversion. We need to pray for his family. We need to pray for his fellow trans activists, his leftist activists, that he was a part of this particular group and this rising violence of the left that we're seeing lately. I'm very concerned about that. Now, why do I say that he's trans left or leftist trans activist? Well, because that's what we found out about this Tyler Robinson. He is, and all of the media that's being honest right now is reporting, except for, of course, the mainstream media. The mainstream, they ignore facts conveniently. But Tyler Robinson was in a male-to-male relationship with another individual called Tyler Twigg. And Lance Twiggs is his name. And Lance Twiggs is a transitioning transgender individual. So they had a male-to-male homoerotic relationship, the killer, Tyler Robinson, with this Lance Twiggs. And interestingly enough, this Lance Twiggs is cooperating with the investigation, and he acknowledges himself to be a furry, which, again, a lot of my viewers might not even know what this is. It's a sexual perversion in which people dress up in costumes as animals and so forth. So this is the kind of depraved mind that inspired the ideology that led Tyler Robinson to kill Charlie Kirk. We just have to be clear about that. Well, how do we know that? Well, because Lance Twiggs is cooperating with the investigation. Apparently, their relationship only went so far, and as much as Tyler Robinson is not cooperating at this moment with the FBI's investigation, but his lover, Lance Twiggs, the furry trans, male to female transitioning individual, is cooperating. And so, we have a slice of the kind of ideology that led Tyler Robinson to do this. Interestingly enough, Lance Twiggs says that he hates Christians, and he was identified as a Biden voter. And again, he's a part of this sort of strange online perversion cult that are called furries. Again, a lot of this is male-to-male homoerotic activity in which adult perverted men dress up in costumes and have orgiastic, fornicative, perverse, sodomizing behavior and so forth. And that's the ideology that drove Tyler Robinson to kill Charlie Kirk. Of course, Charlie Kirk speaks against all of these things. Charlie Kirk was a very strong Christian. He always spoke against transgenderism, against homosexuality, against perversions, fornications, all of that sort of thing. Now we wonder, okay, so what about, maybe that's just his personal life? How do we know that that's the ideology that drove him to kill Charlie Kirk? Well, because he put it on the bullet casings in the left in the magazine of the rifle. He only fired one shot, and we know what those casings said. One of them was Bella Ciao, which is a fascist or anti-fascist song from Italy in the 1940s, I believe. Something that anti-fascist or Antifa groups chant or sing somewhat regularly, I'm told. There was another bullet casing that had, again, this sort of furry, homoerotic language of notices bulge. What's this? Now, for most of us normal people, what do those words even mean? But again, it's kind of a sexualized, perverse meme that is used in this sort of leftist trans culture. And what concerns me about all this is that the left is increasingly apparently using violence to try to foist their ideology on America writ large. Now, the right does not use violence. Interestingly enough, let me just make that point really clearly in this. When a martyr, let's say on our side, the right dies, like Charlie Kirk is assassinated, there are no torching of cities. There are no city destructive riots taking place in our nation today. You don't see images of burning cars and arsons taking place and burning down buildings and burning Wendy's restaurants and so forth. The right does not do that. The right typically does not use, at least the Christian conservative right, does not typically use violence as a means to propagate our viewpoint, but the left does. And so you could compare the killings of George Floyd on one hand to the assassination of Charlie Kirk on the other, and you're going to see very, very clearly that there's a major difference in the way that we respond to these sorts of things. And here's a survey that I saw on Twitter today that I want to point out that really drives home this point. It says most Americans say it's unacceptable to be happy about public figures' deaths, but younger and more liberal Americans are more likely to call it acceptable. So this is why I'm saying what we're seeing is the rise of leftist violent activism. In fact, it looks like this Tyler Robinson was part of something like a trans terror cell. There was a group out of Salt Lake City, sort of a violent Antifa group, highly organized and associated with transgenderism and trans behavior and so forth, that he might have been a part of. Facts are still coming out. This is Tuesday morning that I'm making this video. We're going to see a lot more about the death cult of leftist trans violence that Tyler Robinson was probably a part of. Again, I'm saying probably, but all the information is pointing in that direction. Look at this. U.S. adults, always or usually acceptable, basically to celebrate the death of a political opponent. Only 8% of Americans would say that. 14% would say they're not sure. And 77%, would say it's always or usually unacceptable to celebrate kind of violence. But look at this. When you begin to break this down, it's interesting that the more liberal you are, the more accepting you are of violence. So very liberal, 24% say it's always or usually acceptable. That's the largest red block on this chart. You see that? So the biggest block of those that would say it's always or usually acceptable, good, it's commendable to celebrate the death of your political rivals. 24%, it's like a quarter. That is shocking. That is absolutely shocking. 20% say they're not sure about that. Only 56%, the lowest number on this bar graph, would say it's unacceptable. Now, if you go down to the very conservative, those who would say it's acceptable to celebrate the death of a political rival, way down here, you see this? It's the lowest block on the graph. That means that the more conservative you are, the less likely you are to celebrate violence. And look at this. It's the largest bar on the graph. 90% of very conservative people say that it is always or usually unacceptable to celebrate the death of a political rival or so forth. So basically what this research suggests is that the more liberal you are, the more likely you are to be okay with this kind of violence. Now, we're thankful that Tyler Robinson's family is cooperating with this investigation. I think that's a very good thing. But the left is going to use his family to try to smear him as right. You see how this works? So what we know about Tyler Robinson's family is that he grew up in a relatively conservative home. I think they probably leaned right, although there's virtually nothing on their social media that would suggest they're activist right or even hard Republican right or MAGA or anything like that I'm aware of. They seem to be just kind of a conservative family. I think that they might have been Mormon. I'm not 100% sure about that. They certainly had guns in the home. They taught Tyler how to use guns, I believe, from an early age and so forth. So what you're hearing in the leftist media, is that Tyler Robinson, the killer, grew up in a conservative family with guns, and he's a white guy, which is, using all of the demographics to make the exact opposite point of what he was. He is driven by hard leftist, trans-violent ideology. That's exactly what we know about him. And, going back to this graph that just has me so disturbed about violence, it does seem that the left is using assassination violence so much more recently, and we can think about the shooting of Scalise. We can think about the 2 assassination attempts of President Trump. So we had assassination attempt A, which happened here in Butler County, right where we are here, not too far from this church, Butler County in western Pennsylvania. And then there was Trump attempted assassination B. Both of them failed, thank goodness. That was the one that took place on the golf course. We had an assassination attempt on the life of Brett Kavanaugh, Supreme Court Justice. And so basically what we're seeing is just again and again and again, there's going to be these high-profile assassination attempts that are taking place. Well, let's look at some news headlines from this morning. FBI Director Kash Patel reveals details about alleged Kirk's assassination texts. If we scroll down, we can read this. FBI Director Kash Patel shared new details Monday night about the prosecution of Tyler Robinson, the man accused of assassinating Charlie Kirk on September 10th. Patel and Attorney General Pam Bondi appeared on Hannity with FBI Director, first outlining evidence investigators are piecing together. We're going to be interviewing scores of people on these chats on Discord, but not only that, but any communications that this individual had. Patel confirmed that investigators had confiscated electronics from the suspect's Utah home and that of his alleged partner. Again, that's his trans, furry, gay, queer, romantic partner. It really looks to me right now like what Tyler Robinson was doing was trying to impress his transgendered lover. That's what it looks like. Now, at this moment, it's not entirely clear how much Lance Twiggs knew about this, but it definitely seems, at least from my perspective, that what Tyler Robinson was trying to do was trying to impress his furry lover to show just how committed he was to this entire lifestyle. We've seized multiple electronic devices from the home of the suspect and his romantic partner. We've got computers, laptops, gaming systems, cell phones. All right, so we're going to see a lot more about that in the coming days, I would imagine. And I have every reason to believe that the more we look into this, the more leftist this particular individual is going to be. I think this might be the picture right here that they took and they AI'd it and they put a Trump t-shirt on this guy to try to immediately make him look as though he was part of the right. But obviously that is certainly not true. Now, there's so much more to the story that is really confusing. And one of the reasons why we think that this might have been something like a conspiracy is because immediately we had this guy. Now, let's go back to the day that Charlie Kirk was actually killed, right? Remember how quickly they had a suspect in custody? It was that old guy, that old receding hairline gentleman they had with his hands behind his back, and they had him on the ground, apparently ready to arm him or whatever. Immediately, there's a suspect claiming it was me. Suspect in Charlie Kirk's shooting appeared to confess in Discord chat. No, I'm sorry. This is actually Tyler Robinson. But what I meant to say there was, you immediately have this interesting guy. Who is this guy that they apprehended who was crying out? Remember him, the old guy? He was crying, shoot me, or something like that. What was up with that? It seems like he was ready to confess all of it right there, but he wasn't the actual shooter. So, putting this together, you wonder, okay, well, how many people were actually involved in this? This that I was going to show you right here is actually part of his confession, Tyler Robinson's confession. Sorry, I put up the wrong slide there. It was me, suspect in Charlie Kirk shooting, appeared to confess in the Discord chat. I'm sorry for all this. Read a message from the suspect's accounts, according to two people familiar with the message, and screenshots obtained by the post. Okay, so Tyler Robinson obviously confessed this. Now, here's what I meant to put up here. First man arrested for Charlie Kirk shooting wanted to help the shooter escape, according to documents. Okay, so how many people were involved in this? We're hopefully going to find out. There were, by the way, also Facebook and Twitter posts before it even happened saying that something was going to happen on the day that it did. So let's look at this article from News Nation. The first man arrested in connection with the daily shooting of Charlie Kirk yelled, "I shot him. Now shoot me," immediately after the shooting in an attempt to help the shooter escape, according to newly filed documents. George Zinn, age 71, was taken into custody following the shooting, but he was later cleared on having any direct involvement with the shooting. He was arrested on suspicion of obstruction of justice. Well, we're certainly going to find out more about that story, I'm sure, because that is really, really interesting and highly relevant. Now, let me just try to make some concluding applications here if I can. So much of this is unfolding even at the moment, but putting the big pieces together, we have a shooter that is motivated by hate. He hates the right. He hates Christianity. He's involved in a gay or homoerotic male-to-male relationship with a transgendering furry. So we know that. We know that they hated Christianity. And so we've also seen, just looking at this, again, let me just put this up one more time. There's this strange rise in leftist approval and appreciation of violence. Man, that's going to be a problem for our nation. I'm really concerned about this. I hope you're concerned about this too. This is why we actually have to pray for those who persecute us, right? Going back to my prayer request for this morning, we have to pray for those who persecute us. Not only pray for their conversions, not only pray for them to have a change of heart, that the Holy Spirit would work in their lives, but we also have to pray that God would bring them to justice. After all, justice is a very biblical motif and idea. And we need to pray for our nation. We need to pray for those who oppose us. And there are many who do. There are many who hate us. There are many who hate our message. Interestingly, Charlie Kirk was one of the most peaceful promoters of his views, his biblical views, his political views, which I largely share. He loved to go on college campuses and take questions from people. My wife and I were watching some videos of him just the other day, and I love the fact that he often called up front those who disagreed with him to jump the line and come talk to him first. He loved to hear from people that agreed with him, Charlie Kirk did, but he also loved to hear from those who completely disagreed with him. And that's just also sad that there are a rising number of violent trans leftist activists and so few people as brave as Charlie Kirk willing to actually go and talk to people. Why is the left so violent? Well, it's fundamentally godless, hates God, hates the Lord, hates Christ. And Jesus said, don't be surprised when people hate you. They hated me first. And so we're not surprised. We shouldn't be surprised when people hate us. The left has a quest for power, but they have an irrational worldview. And so when you combine those two things, a quest for power and an irrational worldview, what you get is this straining jolt of desire for wicked, vehement violence, which is what they're lurching into right now. And only the Lord can stop that, I think. They're anti-creation, and as much as they despise the bodies that God gave them, they despise gender categories, the two biblical gender categories of male and female, and deeply, deeply resentful of people that have peace, joy, hope, and love in their lives. So if you want to do something about it, pray, go to church, go to a Bible-believing church, be faithful to Christ, pray for those who persecute you, and continue pursuing after the Lord. Well, I'm sure there's going to be a lot more details that come forward in the days that ensue, but that's the state of where it is at the moment. Thank you so much for checking into this video. Love you lots. Talk to you later.